Hi. The other day I had a chat with a couple of students about that feeling anxious, that anxiety we get when we think something difficult is going to happen or we're just worried about something. And I was reminded of an event that happened to me a few years ago. So I told them this story. About 10 years ago, I went on holiday over to Ireland, and my nephew thought it would be a real good experience and pleased me to organise a fishing trip on the west coast of Ireland. He did not know that I'm not really much of a swimmer. That's an understatement. Basically, I don't like to swim because I can't tread water. I never learned very well. I can barely swim. So going out in a little boat on the sea was not a great idea from my point of view. So when we set off, I convinced myself that it was probably going to be fine because the boat would be big enough and everything would be fine, and I need not worry. And also, basically, I felt I can't really turn this down because a lot of organisation has gone into it. I look silly, and I don't really want to look silly in front of my nephew and his children. Therefore, I went along with it. So you can imagine my lack of happiness when I see that the boat is tiny, that there are no life belts, and that I really now have either got to say, no, I can't do it, and panic, 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 or pretend those feelings don't exist and go along with it. So I decided I have to control these emotional thoughts. I have to control the way I feel because it would just change their perception of who I was if I said what was actually going on in my stomach, basically. So we went out on the boat, and fortunately, very fortunately, it was very still. The sea was very still at that time, and it was about an hour, maybe an hour and a half later, when my heart rate was not noticeably raised, and I felt not exactly relaxed, but I felt I was back to something close to normal. And I did see a lovely basking shark on the surface. And overall, when I got back, I was obviously extremely pleased that I had gone through with it. But that doesn't mean I would say I enjoyed the experience because I didn't. The thing I knew, however, which affected my judgment, was that the feeling in my stomach, the feeling of anxiety, the raised heart rate that I was going through, was a temporary thing. It was a response to my discomfort at being exposed to a situation where potentially I could have been in deep water without a life belt and at risk. So knowing that this is a thought and knowing that everybody else on the boat was calm and that it was a very, very quiet day, the sea was very flat, I did survive the experience. The thing about that feeling is we get it because of a part of our brain, a very old part of our brain, known as the limbic system, which is basically the emotional brain. So if you think about it, back in time when we needed to run away from dangerous things, people, animals, whatever it might be, we had an instinctive flight response, as it's called. We knew, run away, that looks dangerous. Even today, if we see other people running, we tend to assume they must know something, it must be dangerous, let's run away with them. So that thought of danger, therefore run, is essential, has been essential for our survival. Now, however, the fear of social embarrassment means that we get that panic feeling by being embarrassed, by the thought that we might be embarrassed. And therefore, in all sorts of situations, we have that discomfort feeling. I know in the classroom, an awful lot of students really don't want to read out loud, would not be comfortable doing so because they're concerned about how other people will see them and how other people will think about them, etc., etc., etc. Now, all of those things are merely thoughts. We can deal with that because we have a rational brain which can tell us, okay, this is something I'm not very good at, but I'll just do my best and I'll get through and I won't die. It won't kill me. If people do laugh at anything, well, that just, so what? It's not going to do me any harm, really, is it? And if you've ever wondered whether this can actually make sense, just think of this thought. You're in a crowded situation such as a dining hall with loads and loads of people, and you hear somebody right across the other side of the room mention your name. Immediately you tune into that. Probably, if you ask, the people around you didn't hear that at all, because they're not tuned in to listen out for your name, but your brain is always concerned with your well-being, and therefore it registers when your name is spoken. If you have a name that's not very unusual, you might get that experience quite a few times when it leads to actually nothing. So when you have a feeling of anxiety, of tension, it is basically that your brain has rang the alarm bells. It's ringing the alarm bells because you've been through some other experience before, which led to you having embarrassment and leading to perhaps raised heart rate, like me in the boat, and or going red, etc., and feeling bad about it afterwards and wondering what people thought about you and all those sort of things. So your brain is basically saying, I know this feeling, I don't like it, let's stop. And it wants you to run away from the situation. Obviously, that doesn't really change anything for the better. So the best answer for that feeling is to just go through with the situation and come out the other side. Finally, I could add that one of my personal things is that I can remember being in the nativity play at the age of 5 because I was the innkeeper, and I remember exactly what words I said. And I always thought of myself as a shy person. And at one point in my career, I reached a promotion whereby I knew I was going to have to do a lot of speeches and speaking to large hallfuls of people. And it didn't come easily to me. And during the process of a number of such events over a few years, I gradually moved from being, oh my goodness, I've got to get through this, to enjoying it. I actually can remember the moment because in a little presentation about revision skills to some year 11s and parents alongside a careers event, I got to the moment where I was going to emphasize that you can learn things in a certain way. And I said, I'll teach you how to speak numbers 1 to 5 in Japanese with a little technique I'd been taught myself. So I then said to the audience of year 11s and parents, I'm going to need 3 or 4 volunteers. And it was almost like a wave that hit the room, because the vast majority of parents and students immediately dipped their heads, which I could recognize meant, please don't pick on me, I don't want to do it, please don't ask me. And as a result, I was suddenly struck by a thought. Here am I standing at the front, feeling a little anxious still about talking to a crowd full of people. Why? They're all sitting out there dreading the thought of being brought to the front. So why am I uncomfortable about speaking to them? That doesn't mean I still don't, when I'm asked to do a presentation, still don't get a slight feeling in my stomach, and maybe my heart rate goes up a bit, but nothing like it used to. Because I think I've learned that that feeling is just a hangover from my childhood, and it is something that I can overcome, and I have done a number of times. And the thought of being embarrassed is exactly that. It's just a thought. In the same way, worrying about the exams and worrying about the revision that you are trying to do, it can just get in the way of doing the revision and concentrating on the exam. A little bit of nervous energy helps you stop doing what you shouldn't be doing and go and do revision. The thought of panicking about the exams and what will happen if you fail has the opposite effect. It stops you working. So it's just a thought. It doesn't have to shape everything about you. If you have thoughts that make you feel uncomfortable or whatever, that's all they are, thoughts. And your rational, logical brain can find a strategy to deal with it. The most obvious way to deal with that anxious feeling is to breathe deeply and slowly and calm everything down. Thank you.